So I love pattern designing, and this bag is a designer inspired bag. New pattern day is always so exciting. And I want to introduce you to the Novella. The Novella is a very unique bag. It comes together totally different than I think anything you've probably ever seen. The exterior and the interior are actually built at the same time. It is kind of like a bowl crescent. When you sit it on the table, the sides kind of poke up a little bit. It's kind of a curved bottom. It's pretty neat. We do have a lot of rivets in this bag, but they're optional. You do not have to install the flap with rivets, although it does, I think, make it slightly easier. Optional crossbody strap, of course, with strap connectors. If you don't want a crossbody strap, you don't have to put those on. Okay. We have these beautiful vertical turn locks that are just really cool. I mean, not like, I've never seen anything like it before. They're just amazing, easy to install. All you're going to do is just turn that down and then your flap will open. And then of course to close it, you're just going to put it right back in and turn this back up. It's a little hard to do with one hand, but that goes back together nicely. And well, let me do two hands. Well, before I do two hands, let me show you the inside of the bag. So because the inside of the bag is constructed at the same time the outside of the bag is, all we have is a zipper pocket here. And it hangs down, okay? It's like a hanging zipper pocket. You can see it's like free, okay? That's the only thing we have in here. We don't even have a key fob. And again, it's because of the way the bag is put together. It's all put together at the same time, lining and main part of the bag. So let me go ahead and reconnect this lock. You will see, of course, that we have a grab handle that is really very on trend right now. These grab handle bags are all over the runway for the spring, and we thought it was a great option for a spring pattern release. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial. I'm making it today with our gray faux leather, our gray suede. I'm using Tiny Dots Gray by Tilda, and then the thread is Hoover Gray. So we're very gray today. It's really a great opportunity to color block if you'd like to do that, or of course you can do it solid like the pattern cover, which is beautiful. It does have some purse feet here on the bottom, and again, just a really, it's going to be a little challenging. It's an intermediate bag, but take it slow. Of course, I walk you through step by step. I'm doing it on a Burnett, which is a straight stitch domestic machine. Of course, if you have an industrial, you'll be able to do it no problem. So I hope you enjoy the tutorial. Let's get started. Let's go over these pattern pieces. So the first thing we have is a crossbody strap. And of course, crossbody straps are always optional. We're going to go ahead and do one today for this bag. And to prep for this, I did draw a line down the center of the crossbody strap. And then I put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each side. And you can see they're about a 1/2 inch apart of that center line. So we have one crossbody strap. We also have a handle, okay, and the handle's a little small. This is the grab handle for the top of the bag. I did the same thing, drew a line down the center of the piece and then put double-sided tape on either side of that line. And then we also have strap connectors, and these strap connectors are 2 smaller pieces. I drew a line down the center and then I put 1/2 inch double-sided tape right on top of that line. Okay, so these are going to be the strap connectors, and these are specifically for the crossbody strap. Now, moving on to the main part of the bag, we have our centerpiece. We have only one of these, okay? It has some stabilizer on the back, and the stabilizer is a 1/2 inch from the top and bottom edge and 0.25 or 1/4 of an inch from each side. So we have one of these. We have our layer 1 pieces. Now our layer 1 pieces are kind of shaped like boomerangs, and same type of thing. We have some stabilizer on the back. The stabilizer is a 1/2 inch from each top and bottom edge and a 1/4 inch from each side edge. Okay, So as I mentioned in the beginning, I am kind of doing a little bit of color blocking, but kind of a tone on tone using this gray suede. And then of course my solid is the solid gray. The layer 2 pieces are also shaped like boomerangs, and I'm going to show you the difference between the two in just a minute. But these boomerangs, we're going to call it layer 2, look like this. And just like layer 1, we have stabilizer on the back, a 1/2 inch from the top and bottom, and a 1/4 inch from each side. Now, let me show you the difference between these two pieces. So, I think hopefully you can see here, this is layer 1 piece, this is layer 2 piece. The layer 2 piece is more pointed here at the edge, where the layer 1 piece actually has a straight edge on it, okay? And that is important. You don't want to mix these up. So make sure you use your little tags that we give you in the pattern to clip onto these pieces, and you keep layer 1 separate from layer 2. Then we have our 2 side pieces, and here they're just kind of little guys. And again, I have some stabilizer on the back. Now the stabilizer is a 1/2 inch from the top edge, and then a 1/4 inch all the way around. Now, this bag is finished with a little bit of binding on top, because the bag goes together totally different than anything you've ever seen. If you feel like you want to bring your stabilizer pieces to the top on both of your layer 1 and layer 2 pieces, your side and your main body kind of centerpiece here, you can do that. Just make sure that your machine can handle it, and because this essentially, we're not going to fold these over, okay? This is where the binding is going to go. So in order to kind of help with thickness, we kept it out of the seam allowances, but keep in mind that if you feel like you're using a faux leather or a fabric that's a little floppy, then, or maybe even using like a cotton canvas, you're probably going to want to bring that all the way up to the top, and it's going to help give you a nice sturdy surface to stitch your binding onto. Now for the exterior, we also have a bottom piece, and here's our bottom piece. It's just a teeny tiny little guy here. We do have some heavy stabilizer on the back. It's a 1/2 inch from each edge, so essentially it's centered on there. We also have our flap. Now we have 2 flap pieces, okay? They're identical, and one of them has no stabilizer at all. The other one has stabilizer, but we have 3 separate pieces of stabilizer, 1, 2, and 3. And so what you want to do is start at the bottom when you go to put the stabilizer onto this flap. You can start at the bottom, put it a 1/4 inch from this bottom edge, should be centered, and centered will give you a 1/4 inch on each side. And the reason why this is a little mix as far as how the stabilizers are put on is because of curved edges. Whenever I am stitching something with a curved edge, I'm always going to use a lesser seam allowance, which in this case is 0.25 inches, and then something that is on the top or something that we could use a larger seam allowance for, we're going to use a 1/2 inch. So going back to this flap, of course we have the curved piece here at the bottom. You can kind of see how that's on there. You're going to leave just a scant 1/8 of an inch and then put your second piece of stabilizer. And then you're going to finish up with your third piece of stabilizer at the top, and again, leave just a scant 1/8 of an inch between. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow this flap to fold nicely right in between those stabilizer pieces, so that when it's on the top of your bag, it behaves as it should. We have a zipper pocket on the inside, and because the bag is constructed in a way where the main part of the bag and the lining is put together at the same time, the zipper pocket's a little different. It's actually going to hang on the inside. So we have a back and a front piece. Okay, they're basically the same thing. One just happens to have a zipper opening in it. And then you also have a zipper pocket lining piece. It's one large piece, okay? And I have, of course, some classic fuse woven interfacing on the back of all of my lining pieces. I'm using, this is Tiny Dots Gray by Tilda. And then, of course, we have 2 side pieces, and our 2 side pieces are just like the main piece. Again, classic woven or classic fuse on the back. So we have 2 of those. We have 1 main piece, just like the main piece I showed you before. And then we have our layer 1 and our layer 2 pieces, of course, one of each. Okay, so this is layer 1 because it has this flatter surface on it here. And then layer 2 has the more pointed edge here. And then lastly, we have some binding pieces. Now we have 2 lining binding pieces, and where we're going to put this is just around the sides once we stitch our sides on. I do recommend a couple things. Number 1 is if you are uncomfortable with binding, use a dark color. And like I usually like to use black and use black thread, because if you have to stitch back over it, no problem, nobody's ever going to see it. The other thing is, if you decide to use binding the same color as your lining, which I am choosing to do, put interfacing on the back, okay? Put some classic fuse woven interfacing on the back. It's going to make your binding a lot sturdier, and it's going to make it much easier to work with when we actually stitch it onto the bag. And then lastly, we have an upper binding piece. This is going to be in our faux leather, and there's no stabilizers or anything on the back of this. We want this one to kind of be pliable and be able to go all the way around the top of that bag with no issues. So we have one of those. Okay, now, when constructing this bag, there is a point where I highly recommend you do not turn your bag if you're working on a domestic machine. It's going to make putting the bag together a lot easier. If you're using an industrial machine, then I recommend you turn it a little earlier. I'm going to make sure I notate that in the video. We're going to go ahead and use the Burnett, the B08 machine, to make the bag. But I'll make sure I let you know, if you're using an industrial machine, go ahead and turn it now. And of course, the pattern also notates when to do that. So we are going to go over to the Burnett and we're going to start stitching. In step 1, the very first thing we're going to do is work with the crossbody strap, the handle, and the strap connectors. So you're going to do exactly the same thing on the handle as we do the crossbody strap. Since this is so long, I'm going to show you and demonstrate on the handle itself. So you're going to draw a line down the center, as I mentioned before, and put 1/4 inch double-sided tape on each side of the line. And the tape is, roughly about 1/2 inch away from each other. I'm going to go ahead and peel the backing off of the tape and then fold the long edges to the center, and I'm keeping them just below the line I drew. Do not push them all the way up or turn them all the way up to the line. Okay, so you can see here there's the line and it's just below the line. When I do this side, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Just leave it below the line, and when you get done, you're going to have a space between your 2 sides. And the reason why we want to do this is because as we fold this, you can see that that space gets taken up by the fold of the fabric. Okay, we want to leave enough space between so that it folds nicely. So once I fold it, I will go ahead and put a few wonder clips on there. And then we're going to stitch the open edge first using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to turn it around starting from the same edge and stitch the other side using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now if you want to do 2 lines of stitching, you can do one at an 1/8 and one at a 1/4 just to kind of give it a little bit more of a decorative look. It is totally up to you. I'm going to repeat that exact same process with the crossbody strap. Of course, the only difference is it is a lot longer. So once my crossbody strap is folded, again, I will stitch just like I described with the handle piece itself. The strap connectors, the only difference with these is that you have one piece of tape and you're going to actually fold the long edges to the center, and you want to make sure that they meet in the center. We're not going to fold this piece again. We're only going to fold it to the center this one time. So when I get through, you will see that I have no space. They're actually touching these 2 edges, long edges in the center. Okay. So on these strap connectors, what I'm going to do is stitch down each edge, and I'm going to stitch, and this is important, use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, because then when we stitch the strap connector to the bag itself, we're going to use an 1/8 to get it on there. Okay, so we're going to go to the machine and we're going to go ahead and do this stitching, and get these strap connectors and handles and crossbody straps all stitched up. So now I have my crossbody strap completed. I did do 2 rows of stitching on that. I have the handle completed, again 2 rows of stitching, 1/8 and 1/4 on both of those. And then I have the strap connectors completed, and these are stitched at 1/4 of an inch. Don't do 2 rows of stitching. We'll do the second row when we actually stitch it to the sides of the bag. Okay, to finish up the crossbody strap, we are going to we need our 2 swivel clasps in our slide adjuster. I'm going to take one short edge and I'm going to feed it up through the slide adjuster. Now you can do a couple things here. If you do not have rivets, you can stitch this in place and that's fine. Or if you do have rivets, you can go ahead and punch a hole and set a rivet. Okay, so I chose to go ahead and set a rivet. I'm going to slide a swivel clasp onto the side here. And then once I do that, I'm going to go ahead and feed that side back through the slide adjuster. I'm going to pull it pretty tight. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And here's my other end. And now I'm just going to take this end, fold it around the swivel clasp, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. You can either stitch or set a rivet here as well. So I have the crossbody strap completed. I'm going to set that aside. Basically, it's totally done. We're just going to need to connect it to the bag once the bag is completed. So in the pattern, I give you a measurement to measure the strap connectors. Basically, from one short edge, you are going to measure over. And from there, I'm going to take a little bit of double-sided tape. If you don't have a double-sided tape, you could certainly just use Wonder Clips here. But double-sided tape definitely makes it a little easier. It's going to put a little bit of double-sided tape right over that mark. Now, you can use D-rings, you can use triangle rings, you can use O-rings, you can use whatever kind of strap connector or a ring here that you want on the strap connector. And I'm going to peel the backing off. And on the side, the line's not in the center, it's off to the side some. So the side that's longest from the mark is where I'm going to put my ring. And I'm going to fold that edge back to the line. And I'm going to take the shorter edge and fold it to the line. So you can see here that the part where the strap connector is comes down further, and that's so that when we stitch this on, we can actually catch that in our stitch going across this, okay, going horizontally across that. So I'm going to repeat for this strap connector here. Go ahead and put my ring on, whatever kind I decide. Fold it to the line, and then I'm going to take this section, fold it up, and you can see that is completed as well. So we're going to put these aside, and in a further step down the road, we're going to stitch these to our side pieces. But for right now, we'll just set them aside for that later step. In step 2, we're going to work on the flap. And the first thing you want to do is to take your flap piece with the stabilizer. And I give you some measurements and tell you exactly where to draw this horizontal line and where to draw these 2 vertical lines. This is where we're going to place our slit so we can slide the handle into that spot. So we want to make sure that these are no more than 1 inch, and if anything you want to undercut, you can always go back and make the hole bigger, but you can't make it smaller. So whenever I cut these, I always use a straight edge and some kind of craft knife, and pretty much just take the point of my craft knife and put it into the spot where I want to start, and then I'll just drag it down to the spot where I want to finish. So I will just and then you see I have a hole here. I'll do the same thing on this side. Okay, so now I have a hole where each handle piece is going to go. So from here, we're going to take the other side of the flap, and this is the side without the stabilizer, of course. We're going to put these right sides together. And actually, even before we do that, we're going to fold these top edges down. You can use a little bit of double-sided tape here. This one's easy enough because you're going to just fold it right over the stabilizer. I mean, you can see where that is, you can feel where it is. You're not going to be able to fold it past that point. Essentially, we're just folding this over by the roughly 1/4 inch that we have here. It's actually, I think it's more like a 1/2 inch. Hold on, let me double check that for you. Yeah, it's you know, anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2, depending on how you placed your stabilizer. That's the thing. If you left a little bit more of a space between your stabilizers, you might get a little bit less than 1/2, but it should be about a 1/2 inch here at the top. Mine ended up being about 3/8. So I'm going to peel the backing off and just fold the top edge right over that stabilizer. And it is, you know, a little, you have a slight curve there. Okay. So you can see how nice, and it's just, again, very slight curve. We're going to do the same thing for this piece. Now, of course, this piece, we don't have the stabilizer to help us fold it over. So I'm going to fold it over by roughly a 1/2 inch. This is the underside, and the underside is basically the part that's going to be against the bag once you stitch it on. And so you don't want to see this from this side. Okay, this is going to be the front. You can see the stabilizer, how this flap is going to automatically fold. And so we don't want to see the back side peeking out. So this was, like I said, about 3/8. It wasn't quite a 1/4 because I probably left just a little bit extra space between my stabilizer. I'm going to make sure I fold this one over a 1/2 inch. And that should give me the little bit of extra that I need there so that I don't see it from the right side. And of course you can measure that. You don't have to eyeball it. Go ahead and draw a line, measure it, and make sure that that's folded over. So from here, we're going to put these right sides together, and you can double check and see, and you can see here, you know, the backside is slightly larger as it should be because this is going to be my front. This is the part with the slits, and I want this to be slightly larger than the backside. So wonder clip this in place. And then we are going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Whenever there is a seam, or excuse me, a curve involved, I always like to use a 1/4 inch versus a 1/2 inch. Just works a lot better when you're going around curves. I'm going to make sure I stitch with the stabilizer side up. I don't want to stitch on my stabilizer. I want to stitch like a scant 1/8 of an inch away from it so that when I go to turn this, it turns beautifully. Once you stitch, you want to go ahead and cut back the corners a little bit, maybe cut little triangles in, or like I have here. It just helps when you turn this stay nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the flap. And as long as you didn't stitch on your stabilizer, this should lay nice and flat for you without having to spend a lot of time poking corners out. Okay, so you can see how nice that is. Now, the flap, you can kind of see how it's going to fold, okay, from where the stabilizer is. If you want to put a bag tag on your flap, you're obviously going to have some kind of connection here. If you're going to use a magnetic snap, you want to make sure that you put your magnetic snap on before you close the top. If you're going to do some kind of turn lock, you can just wait and punch the hole in afterwards. And then if you're going to put a bag tag on the front here, maybe you have a smaller one that you want to put on your flap, you can certainly do that. With this closure, you don't have a lot of space for it, so I'm going to put my tag on the main part of my bag. So from here, I can go ahead and close this up because I am not going to put any kind of magnetic snap. I'm going to have a different kind of closure. So I'm going to wonder clip all of this in place. This top edge is already turned under nicely. Oops. Okay, I'll go ahead and put a few clips here. And then we're going to stitch this using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, just top stitch it in place. Okay. Once this is stitched all the way around, I'm going to take my pattern piece and I'm going to line up these little dotted edges with the side. Okay, that's just with the side of the flap. I'm going to line the top edge here up with the top of the flap. Because of course at this point, this is already top stitched down, and that's okay. So go ahead and mark your rivet placement. And now, if you decide that you are going to stitch the flap on instead of using rivets, obviously don't do this step and don't punch your holes. But if you are going to do rivets, we're going to go ahead and punch the holes now just to make it a little bit easier. We're going to mark it. Once the handle is on, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult. And of course, we want to do everything we can to make our life as easy as possible. So I see here where all of my marks are. Go ahead and punch the holes for your rivets. And of course, I'm not going to install them yet because we don't have the rest of the bag done, but at least this part here will be completed. Once your holes have been punched, go ahead and slide your handle in your slots. Now, when you slide this in, you want to make sure that you go all the way to the edge of your top stitching. Okay, push it all the way in there, as far as it'll go. You're going to do that for, of course, both slits. Go ahead and slide it in. And now we're going to go ahead and top stitch this on. We're just going to do about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to go, down, turn around, come back. Same thing on this side. Rivets are optional at this point, but if you would like to put rivets in, you're going to go halfway between these two stitches, which should be about 1/2 inch and centered. And you're going to go ahead and place rivets on both sides, catching the handle in between. And the rivets, of course, are going to come out to this side here. It's going to give the bag a lot more stability. You're going to be grabbing this bag by this handle often, and so you want to make sure you have enough. If you don't want to do rivets, or if you don't have the ability to do rivets, another line of stitching here would really be a good idea. That completes the flap. So we're going to move on to step 3, and step 3 is the interior zipper pocket. So we're going to need our 2 faux leather pieces, our lining piece, and of course our zipper. And the first thing we're going to do is line our zipper up on one side of the zipper pocket. We're going to wonder clip this in place. So the wrong side of the zipper is going against the right side of the pocket. We're going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now that that is on, we're going to open this up so that the zipper tape is laying flat, and we're going to top stitch that zipper tape down so that it stays nice and flat on its own. Once that is top stitched down, you want to go ahead and install your zipper pull. We're going to take our piece of faux leather that has the zipper opening, And we're going to put double-sided tape on the bottom side of the opening and on the top. Go ahead and remove the backing from the tape, and we're going to center the zipper in the opening. You want to make sure you're centering it from side to side as well as from left to right. Okay. Okay, from here, we are only going to stitch on the bottom edge. So you want to start about 1/8 of an inch beyond this corner, and you're going to stitch all the way to about 1/8 of an inch beyond this corner. I'm going to pull my threads through to the back and tie them off so that I don't have a back stitch on here. So I have that completed. I will go ahead and tie these threads off. Now, because of the way the bag is being put together, we can't do a zipper pocket in this bag the way we would typically do one, where we just kind of make it part of the lining. The bag is essentially put together, the exterior and the lining at the same time. It's all built at one time, and so this pocket is just to have a little something on the inside for us to, you know, put things in there securely where we don't have to worry about anything falling out and, you know, people getting to it as quickly if something bad happens. Obviously, we hope it doesn't. But, you know, it's just to give us a little something on the inside. Okay, so this is what we have. Just a stitch at the bottom. So I'm going to put some double-sided tape right along the back side of the top of this zipper. Peel the backing off the tape, and then take the pocket and go ahead and place it right on top of that tape. Okay, so now from here we're going to start where we left off, pick up right where we left off. We're going to go up, around, and then back down to finish off the stitching the rectangle. Now that that's completed, I'm going to do the same thing. Go ahead and tie this, pull this to the back, tie it off. And then, of course, we'll have to stitch the rest of the sides closed. And you just get as close as you can on that. You know, if there's a teeny tiny little space open, it's not going to be a problem. So we'll tie these off. And now I'm going to turn this over, and from the bottom, I'm going to stitch up as far as I can. And it's going to be a little awkward, but over here I'm going to do the same thing. I'll start at the bottom and stitch up as high as I can, you know, as far to the top as I can go. And I'm just, you know, it's always easier to stitch into a seam like that than to start there, because the back of your presser foot is thicker than the front. So I will just turn this around and stitch from the bottom up. So you can see here, I have it like one stitch off in each spot. That is not going to be a problem. When you reach in here, that one stitch is not going to make a difference. You're not even going to know that it's like that. I was able to stitch all the way up to the zipper tape, actually onto the zipper tape, but you know, just didn't quite connect with the other stitch. Again, no problem at all. Okay, I had forgotten to cut my curves in, so I went ahead and did that real quick. And I'm going to put these two pieces right sides together now. So I've got the back pocket piece, the front pocket piece, and I'm just wonder clipping those together. We're going to stitch using a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, except for the top. I'm going to leave that top open. Okay, so I'm going to start here and just go all the way around. So just like with the flap, I went ahead and cut triangles in the corner so that when I turn this, it will be nice and flat. So I can poke these corners out. And then we're going to wonder clip this in place. And we're going to top stitch all the way around this pocket. Make sure these corners look good. Okay, and we are going to stitch around. Now, at this point, you can go ahead and close this top. The top's going to end up getting stitched into the top of the bag, so if you forget to do it at this point, it's not a huge worry. But I'm going to go ahead and stitch all the way around using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm just going to make sure that my pocket is in there nice and flat before I top stitch the top portion closed. And there is the completed zipper pocket. So we are going to move on to step 4, which is the exterior construction. Before we begin step 4, the first thing we need to do is install the base of our turn lock. Now, depending on what kind of lock you're using, it may depend on exactly where you place your lock. So just kind of be aware of that. I'm going to be using a vertical turn lock. This is a Simply Classic product. By no means do you have to use this. It just looks really good with this bag. And the way the turn lock works is there are 2 parts to it. Okay, you have this part and this part. So the smaller part is what's going to go on your flap, okay? So this will go on the flap. This is going to go on the bag. Let me take this off so I can show you how it works. So the way it works is it folds down like this, and then it locks up like this. So when it folds down, okay, this is again on your bag, or on your flap, it's going to go into the hole, and then it's going to turn like this, and it'll be closed. So when you go to install it, again, this is flap, put this aside, we'll work with that later. You want to mark the placement according to the pattern piece, and this is for the upper hole, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just make a mark here. And that mark is for the upper hole. Now, if you look at the base piece, you see that the hole is actually a little closer on one end than the other. Make sure you mark it correctly, okay? When you take this off, you'll see that the upper hole is the one that's closest to the edge, okay? So this goes, of course, together like this. I already took the screws out, but the upper edge is this here. This is the upper edge, and it's where the hole is closest to the edge. So I'm just going to take that back piece off, place it right on top so that the top screw hole matches with the placement I just made, and then mark the bottom hole. Go ahead and punch the holes. And then to install this, you're simply going to place the lock, again, with the little square piece towards the top. I don't have any stabilizer on this piece because I'm realizing that I actually forgot to do this in the beginning. So I'm showing you how to do it now. Place the screw in, and then you'll be able to screw this together. Now, typically with these locks, the back part here has got a pretty large hole. You want to make sure that that part can actually come through the holes you make. So if your holes are not large enough, I mean, theoretically, this should be able to come right around that piece. And this is pretty much the way it is for any kind of lock, turn lock that you do, or any kind of lock. That should come through the hole. So if your hole isn't big enough, make sure that you punch larger holes. And then, of course, just like normal, you're going to just screw this together. Always recommend Loctite whenever you're using anything, that has to do with screws. Things are going to stay together a lot better. You'd be surprised what will come apart when you least expect it. So you'll go ahead and install that in. And, theoretically, this is kind of a pretty back. So even if you install this through your lining, it's going to be okay. It's going to look okay. But if you want to make sure you don't see it through your lining, on the back side, then obviously you're going to put it on before we stitch our lining on here. Okay, and then essentially that is how the turn lock works. Okay, so we're going to continue on. Of course, we need our side pieces for this. We're going to need our bottom piece, all of our layer pieces, and our middle section. And the first thing we want to do is work with our bottom piece. So on our bottom piece, one edge is longer than the other. We're going to put double-sided tape along the long edges. And then we're going to peel that tape off, and we're going to fold the long edges right over the stabilizer. Okay, so just as tight as you can against that stabilizer. I give you some measurements in the pattern, and I tell you how far to measure in from each unfolded edge and how far to measure in from each folded edge. Where these lines intersect is where you're going to install your purse feet. So depending on what kind of purse feet you have, if they're screw back, obviously punch holes. If they're prong back, you can make little slits, but go ahead and install 4 purse feet. Once you have your purse feet installed, you're going to take your base piece here, your middle section, you're going to find the center. So I'm just going to take the short ends, put them together, and make small little notches to find the center of this piece. I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom piece, and then we're going to match up those notches. Now, I'm going to use a little bit of double-sided tape to hold this in place. You can certainly use Wonder Clips instead. I'm going to put a couple pieces on here, and then we're going to stitch this on that bottom piece. I'm going to kind of take advantage of this and put this over the screws as well. That'll kind of help those from coming apart, protect the faux a little bit. And I highly recommend you use Loctite here whenever you're using screws to hold screws in, because they will somehow, they can and will come apart. So go ahead and peel the backing off. And here's of course, my piece. Zoom out just a tad for you. And all I'm going to do is line the center up. Go ahead and stick this piece right on top. And now we're going to stitch an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance down each long edge. Okay, if you have a bag tag that you do not put on the flap that you want to put on this bag, I suggest you do it now. And you're going to, from whatever edge is going to be your front, which at this point, you're probably about the same, it doesn't really matter. You're going to find the center, and you're going to go up 2 inches from the center of the bag, or the center here of the bottom piece. So I'm going to kind of make a mark as to where the center is. And then I'm going to come up 2 inches from that. That's going to be the bottom of my tag. Okay, so, depending on what shape yours is, you might want to, if you've got a longer one, regardless, I really feel like this should be the bottom of the tag, whether it's square or, however yours is shaped. It's just going to, you don't have a lot of space here because your flap's going to come down, and this bottom is actually going to, this part right here is actually going to be part of the bottom as well. So just kind of trust the process. Go ahead and stick it on. That 2 inch mark is the bottom of the flap. So once you get your bag tag on, if you do have one, you want to go ahead and put your this is my lining piece. I'm going to go ahead and put that wrong sides together. They should be exactly the same, and I'm going to Wonder Clip these together. Now, if you prefer to use double-sided tape here to hold these 2 pieces together, of course you can certainly do that. I'm just going to use some clips, and then using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch these two pieces together. So these pieces are now basted together, and we're going to work with our layer 1 piece. So as a reminder, your layer 1 piece is the one that has this kind of flat edge here, as opposed to your layer 2 piece, which has more of a curved edge. Okay. So find the center of the long edges of your layer 1 piece. And I'm going to go ahead and do both layer 1 pieces at the same time, and also the layer 1 lining pieces. Okay, so from here we're going to start building this bag. So take one of your layer 1 pieces, you're going to take that flat edge and you're going to put it right against the center point of your bag. This is your main piece. You can do it right sides together and clip that in place. Now, some of my testers found that staples or double-sided tape worked here, so do whatever you need to get this to kind of work out, because it is going to start curving. So once you go ahead and wonder clip the base piece here in place, you're going to line up your top edge and wonder clip. And then you're going to do the same thing with this other top edge and wonder clip. Now, I do recommend going ahead and stitching this on before you put the lining on, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. You're going to stitch this on using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, very important, 1/8 of an inch. So you can already kind of see how this is starting to curve. So from here, we're going to take a lining piece. We're going to place the linings right sides together. And again, this straight edge here, we're going to line up with the center and wonder clip in place. And this is where I think you might find it easier to either use double-sided tape or staples. Because what we're going to do is line up the centers again. We're going to kind of repeat the process. But we already have this trying to curve in the other direction, okay? So you're really going to have to kind of jimmy with it to make it fit. But always start with the edges up here. That's going to help. Once you clip that together, you can kind of fit the rest of this in, okay? And you may have to manhandle it a little bit, and that's okay. Go ahead and make it do what you want it to do. Okay. Now, from here, I found it easier to stitch from the right side for a couple reasons. Number one, I can see exactly where my other stitch is. It was 1/8 of an inch. This time I want to do 1/4 of an inch. I also don't want to stitch on my stabilizer, so I'm going to stitch 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to come all the way down and then end over here on this side. If you haven't back stitched yet, you do want to make sure you back stitch on this round here. Okay, so 1/4 of an inch. Now that I have both the lining and the main part of the body sewn, I'm just going to take these two pieces and I'm going to flip them wrong sides together. And I'm going to wonder clip match the centers here and wonder clip them in place. Okay, so my seam allowance is going towards this layer 1 piece. So we're going to just kind of flip this so the bowl is facing kind of inside here, and we're going to top stitch 1/8 of an inch all the way down here, and then we're going to go ahead and baste the rest of this together using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, as I am top stitching, I'm going to kind of pull this layer piece out, just kind of tug it so it's nice and taut. Just make sure that the piece is pulled out to as far as it will go based on where the original stitching is. So I'm going to show you this here. The top stitching is done. So now I'm going to go ahead and baste the rest of this piece closed. And of course I'm doing this using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And as you're stitching, don't be afraid to flip this kind of bowl shape to one side or the other. However, it makes it easiest for you to stitch. So here is the first layer piece on. You can see it's already starting to form that kind of bowl shape. Okay, so we're going to take the second layer one piece and we're going to repeat that process by first clipping the center flat edge to the main piece. And then I'm going to go ahead and clip the top edge. And then work the rest of this in. Okay, so now that that's on, I'm going to baste using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I will put the lining on just like I did before, use 1/4 of an inch to get it all sewn together, and then top stitch and baste the pieces together. Just everything exactly the same as when we put this piece here on. Okay, so I now have both layer one pieces on. You can see we have this kind of bowl shape forming. Okay. And we're going to repeat that same process with the layer two piece. So I'm going to again find the center, just like we did before. And in 2 passes, I'm going to first stitch the main piece on, and then I'm going to stitch the lining pieces on. So I will go ahead and find the center of lining and main piece. Okay, now when this piece goes on, you're going to want to kind of put your bowl facing out, I guess you could say. And the bottom part, okay, so the part that is kind of jutting out, not the concave part, but more the convex part, okay? So this almost looks like a boomerang, right? So the bottom part of the boomerang is what's going to go against the layer one piece. Now you can already see how much this piece is curved compared to this piece here, right? So that's what's going to continue to form the bowl shape. So we're going to do the same thing by clipping the main part up here first and then just fitting the rest of this together. Okay, same thing here. And right here is going to be the spot you can see where this wants to come up. You're really going to have to make sure that stays down. And this is where either your double-sided tape or staples are really going to come in handy. My clips are pretty weak, so it's wanting to really come up. My Wonder clips keep breaking, and they've just been smushed so many times that it's time to get a whole new set. Okay, we're going to do the same thing, stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance first to get this main piece on. So here's what we have. Okay. So again, we're going to take the lining piece. We're going to make sure that the bottom side of the boomerang, to me a boomerang is like a half moon. Go ahead and clip this on. And when trying to come up with a name for this bag, I was trying to come up with something that, you know, resembled moon. I mean, it's kind of like the way it's shaped, it's kind of like a crescent moon in a way. And so Nova in other languages means moon. And so we came up with the Novella for the name of this bag. So that's how it came about. Okay, this is going to be the one spot that can be a little bit challenging. Go ahead and pull it. Okay, so you see here, I'm actually having to pull this to make this end here match. Don't be afraid to do that. And poke your bag in, you know, whatever direction is easiest for you. I'm always, when I'm making this bag, and of course I've made it a bunch of times already, I am constantly flipping it, meaning, you know, at some point it's popped out in this direction, other times it's popped out in the other direction. It's just constantly changing. Just depends which seam I'm stitching, so don't be afraid to do that. Okay. All right, so once again, I'm going to stitch from this side. I'm going to kind of poke this out and use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to stitch the lining layer on. And you may have to, when you get closer to the point, just reach underneath and pull your lining so that it is even with your bag, which is what I'm doing right here. Making sure that that's... And if you need to use some hemostats or something to, or stitching awl, you know, by all means, use whatever you need to make sure that stays in place. And then, of course, you can also staple that too. That would help. So I'm just going to kind of pull this. Make sure it's nice and even. Once you get past that point, you should be good to go. So before I flip and top stitch, I always like to kind of poke this out and see if I see any of my basting stitches. And I can see right here I can, okay? So I just didn't quite do the 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. So I'm just gonna poke this back out and just re-stitch over that. No reason to take it apart. I'm just going to, in that little section right there, take a little bit of a deeper seam allowance. And that little bit right there should have done it for me, and it looks like it did. I don't see my stitches anymore. So I'll go ahead and poke this out. Just like for layer 1, I'm going to line up my lining and layer 2 piece, wrong sides together. Okay, I'm going to poke this in this direction. Go ahead and lay it on my machine, and as I top stitch this, I'm just going to be slightly tugging this to make sure the seam allowance is all the way out. Top stitch down, and then I'm going to baste the rest of this using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm trying to hold this down so you can see, but don't be afraid to just let this flip up as you stitch. Just let it do what it wants to do there. So again, I want to show you that top stitching. You can see that all on there. It looks good. So now I'm going to baste the rest of this piece together. So here's what we have so far. Okay, everything looks really good. So I'm going to repeat that process to put the layer 2 piece here on this side. Do it exactly the same way. We come back, we got to do a little bit of prep work first, and then we'll put the sides on. So I have that last layer piece on. I just want to flip this to see how everything looks. It's looking amazing, and you can see you got yourself a little, or big at this point, bowl. Of course, once we put the side pieces on, this will fold up, and it's going to be gorgeous. Okay, so before we put those side pieces on, I'm going to set this aside. We need to put the rings, which looks like my tape came unstuck. Let me re-stick that. We need to go ahead and stitch these on the side pieces. So you're going to want to find the center of your side piece. If you have not done so, which I usually put another piece of double-sided tape on here, I think that I tell you to do that in step 1. It's going to help us hold the connector on the bag. Now, this is another place that rivets are optional. You certainly do not have to put rivets. I'm actually not going to put rivets this time. I'm just going to get as close as I can to the top of the connector, and we're going to stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So it's going to kind of box around our 1/4 inch stitching that we have on here already. So of course I give you a measurement in the pattern. You're going to peel the backing off the tape, and you are going to go ahead and place these on your side pieces. Make sure they're straight. Now, depending on what kind of connector you use, if you use something that's taller than this, you might want to come down a little bit more. You know, again, a pattern is a suggestion, not a rule, so do whatever you would like to make this your own and use whatever kind of hardware you want to jazz it up. This is really a kind of a fancy bag. I really like this bag. It's different than anything I've seen, and I really, different than any other Simply Classic bag for sure. So again, we're going to stitch using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to get as close as I can to the connector, come across. Probably going to have to go backwards for a few stitches to come down, and then because I won't be able to get the presser foot underneath, or the hardware underneath the presser foot. Don't want to do that, obviously. And then once I get far enough down, I'll turn around and then keep coming down and then go all the way around. Just do a box here. So I'm going to go backwards. That should be enough, 2 stitches, and then turn around and come down. And to come a little bit further. And I am going to back stitch, but I'm going to pull this little thread through so that it's not sticking up in the front when I back stitch. And then I'm going to come across this top one more time. And this is what I have, kind of a neat little pattern there. If you did want to put a rivet, you could put one right there in the center. I'm going to forego that this time. I kind of like the simplicity of this. I'm going to do exactly the same thing to stitch the other side connector on. So I now have both of my connectors on. So from here, I'm going to take my lining side pieces and I'm going to put it together with my lining, or my side piece, wrong sides together. Okay, I'm going to stitch around using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now all that is stitched together. I'm going to repeat the exact same process to get these 2 pieces together. So now that I have both side pieces ready to go, if you haven't found the center of the bottom of the side piece yet, go ahead and find that now. Okay, so from here, I'm sure you can probably guess, we're going to stitch this together. We're going to do it right sides together. So I'm going to turn and poke this bag so that the wrong side is facing out. Cut my little thread here. I'm going to match the centers. Oh, it's not going to work. And I'm just going to curve this around. Okay. Go ahead and clip the front or the top section here. And what's going to happen is when you get to the point where the side starts to turn, okay, so here's your side piece, you come straight down and then it curves right here, you have an obvious point, you're going to have to clip your bag just about 1/8 of an inch, just enough to get it to turn so that it will make the turn. So I'm just going to just do a little snip there. Make sure that I wonder clip to that little snip I did, and then I'll be able to fit this rest of this curve in. Okay, do the same thing here. And again, remember that you can always staple these pieces together. So if you're going to staple, you want to do it in your seam allowance. You don't obviously want to do it, any deeper than that. And once you staple, you want to remove your staples after the bag is sewn together. You don't want to keep them in there. I believe I've shown staples in the Farfalla pattern, if I remember right. On that bottom is a rounded bottom, and I think I showed it there. Okay, so we have that clipped together. I'm going to do the same thing to clip this side together. And then make sure right where the point is on your side piece, you do a little snip on your main part of your bag to get that to turn. And you can see you have a little triangle right there where you snipped. Isn't this kind of cool the way this bag comes together? It's very unique. We're going to stitch this using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So your snip can be as deep as, just shy of a 1/4 inch. Again, you want it to line up. Again, another good place to put a staple if you need it. Okay. So from here, we are going to stitch these sides on. If you have a cylinder arm machine, obviously this would be a great place to use it and to do it. I'm going to stitch from the gusset side. So I'm going to lay the main part of the bag down on the bed of the machine, and I'm just going to stitch all the way around. You'll see how I do it. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. right where that little clip is, I'm actually going to stop, pivot a little bit. Make sure that the bottom, I'm not losing it there. Take my hemostats and pull that bottom out. And then go ahead and keep stitching. Wonder clips are flying everywhere. Let me re-clip a few things here. Okay. Again, I'm going to try to stitch all the way to that snip. And then pivot, stop, kind of readjust, and then stitch up. So there's one side. I'm going to peek inside and just make sure I don't see any stitches anywhere, which I don't. Looks good. All right, we're going to stitch the other side on. You know, sometimes with curves, it's almost easier not to clip. Especially when you have these convex and concave curves. As you stitch, a lot of times they kind of come together. And I showed that on the Kaplan video, so if you need to kind of go back and look at that, you'll see how that worked. I'm going to kind of re-clip this side because, again, my wonder clips are weakening and not doing very well holding on. I'm going to stitch all the way to this clipped edge. And then just kind of readjust. So I have my sides stitched on, and I realize now that I forgot to put the main part of my lock on. So I'm going to refilm that for you. Go ahead and stick it in where it needs to be so you know how to put that in. Of course, I'm going to go ahead and put it in now before I finish up the bag, and then we will move on by putting the binding on the sides. Managed to get my lock on, and of course I did show you how to do that. The next thing we want to do is cut back these seam allowances. So if the seam allowance seems to be, uneven in some areas, which is going to happen, all you're going to do is trim them so that they're even and we can put the binding pieces on. So I'm just going to go through and see if there's any areas, and even if there's not, I just want to make sure this is really cut back to, a true, I'd say, you don't really want it to be an 1/8. It's a little bit too small. We stitch it at a 1/4, so right in between there should be just about perfect. Okay. You can see I'm just cutting off a little bit, just enough to make sure everything's nice and even. Do the same thing here. And what I did on my binding pieces is went to the iron and I folded them in half. Okay, first pressed it, then folded the long edges to the center and pressed it again. And folded one more time and pressed it again. So I have nice, neat binding edges, or edges on the binding. I don't want to say accidentally, but I usually use black binding, right? Black bias binding. That's what you see a lot of times. It's kind of like what I call my secret weapon, and works great because you can go right over it. If you miss a spot, nobody can tell. I'm using the same as my lining this time, so just something a little bit different. But don't be afraid to use black if you need to. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Also, I usually do not have binding that has any kind of classic, like woven interfacing on it, like classic fuse. I went ahead and put that on here, and I found it really helped. So I'm going to, at this point, just go ahead and wrap this binding right around this seam. Now remember, this is going to be on the inside, tucked in when it's all said and done. You're not really going to see it, so don't get too upset if it doesn't come out perfect. It's okay. Unless it's done by a machine, it's never going to be perfect. That's just the way it is. So I'm just going to wrap this around. And then in awl or something similar is going to help when you stitch this on. Just something to kind of hold it in place. You're going to have probably a little bit of extra here. I did have you cut it slightly larger just in case. It's always better to have a little bit extra. Okay. So I'm not going to clip this off yet. I'll wait till I get to the end in case I have to readjust. I'm just going to start here. Didn't turn any edges over because we're going to have binding on the top of this bag as well. So I'm not going to worry about trying to turn this little edge over here. It's not going to matter. It's going to be hidden. I'm going to stitch, and I'm really just going to use like an 1/8. I mean, just maybe a little bit more than an 1/8, a generous 1/8 of an inch to get this on. Okay, we'll stitch all the way around. I'm going to stitch the same way with the gusset part facing up, the main part of the bag on the bed of my machine. So right about where that clip is, I'm going to readjust a little bit. So go ahead and inspect my binding. You can see right there, it looks like I went off just a slight little bit, right there. But I'm not even going to worry about that because once it gets turned, you're not even going to see it. And of course, all this looks okay. So go ahead and clip off the extra. Okay, that's what it looks like. So I'm going to repeat that process to put the binding on the other side. It is now time for the final step, step 5, which is the final assembly. Now, if you're working with a cylinder arm machine, you can go ahead, or even in a flatbed that you have a lot of confidence that you can do this with, flip your bag at this point. I'm working on a domestic. I'm going to show you how to do this without flipping your bag at this point. So what I'm going to do, I'm of course going to look in here, and I see this is the front because this is where the turn lock is. So on the back side, I'm going to take the zipper pocket and find the center of my side here, and we're going to stitch that on. Now, again, this is easier if you have some kind of, flatbed and you wait and you don't turn it quite yet. So let me find the center here. What we're going to do is just line up the centers. And we're just going to stitch this right to the top. We're going to use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, okay? We just want to get it on there. We'll stitch over it again when we put our top binding on. Okay, so go ahead and stitch that on. I'm going to actually take the bag and turn it down like this and move this out of the way and stitch this way. So that pocket is now stitched on. The next part is putting the top binding on. So you want to take your binding piece, and it's really easier if you mark the center of this piece so that as you line it up on the top of your bag, you know exactly where to, where the center is. So I'm going to take a ruler and go ahead and mark that. We're also going to use double-sided tape. So if your machine does not love double-sided tape, you're going to want to have an alcohol pad ready so you can be wiping the adhesive off your needle. Of course, you can always use the non-adhesive needles too, the non-stick. Those are great. So I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape and go ahead and stick that on. I'm just going to put it right along the long edge. Do it on both edges. So this is kind of like the last pattern that we released, the Talise, where it's finished with binding along the top. I think a lot of you discovered that it really wasn't as bad as, you know, what you maybe anticipated. And the way this bag is put together, it kind of has to be done this way. I tested a few different ways of finishing the top, and this was by far the best way. Okay, I'm going to peel the backing off of one side, and when I line this up, I want to make sure that I'm going to, of course, put it on the front first, so the front meaning the inside here, and I'm going to line it up so that the back is just, you know, lined up with, of course I know where my back is, I just marked it, that's where my pocket is. So it's just there, and I want to see my line. Okay, I want to see that line I drew, because as I fold this over, you're going to have a little bit of take up there, and we want it to be as even as possible on both sides. Okay, so if anything, if you want to be overcautious, if anything, you want to see a little bit more, maybe even a little bit below the line. Okay, so I'm going to keep going around and stick this to the front of the bag. Now you're going to have a little bit of bulk, of course, over these edges here. So just kind of be prepared for that with your machine. Make sure that if you're stitching with a straight stitch domestic machine, you lessen your press-a-foot tension when you get there, and it'll help you go over that bulk. And when I do this, I fold the bulk in towards the side seam. Let me clip this a little bit more. Which, you know, at this point is a little hard to make it do that, but I'm going to go ahead and at least try to get that to stick down here. It's going to be more when you're stitching that you got to get that edge in. All right, so we're going to come all the way around. And you're going to have a little bit of extra, just like on your other binding piece. You're just going to cut that extra off. So I'm going to make sure that on this side, the overlapping piece is at least even width or slightly longer than the other piece, and I'm just going to snip off the excess. And when I say excess, you see here there's maybe 1.5 inches. I'm just going to maybe leave about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch excess. Okay, so you can see there what that is. Now, one tip, this is not in the pattern, but something that you could do is just taper this underneath piece a little bit, and it'll just help it hide as we turn it. Okay, you won't be able to see that. So now from here, you're going to move the backing off the other side and fold this over. Okay. So this is where you really want to make sure your sides are facing in the right direction. And you can always wonder clip this as well, in addition to help hold it down. And the reason why we're doing this inside out is because we want to stitch from the right side, and it's going to be much easier to stitch from the right side if this is inside out. on a flatbed. Cylinder arm, no problem, you can turn it and you'll be fine. Okay, fold this over. And if you need to even up your top edge a little bit because with the layers maybe they're off a little bit, that's no problem. You can certainly do that before you put this binding piece on. Taking a little bit off the top is not going to make a difference in the construction or, you know, with anything in this bag. So don't worry about that. Okay, come over. I'm going to make sure that this upper piece is overlapping properly. Okay. So now we're going to stitch, and when you stitch this binding on, you want to do it about 1/8 of an inch from the raw edge of the binding. Once we do that round, you can do a second round 1/8 of an inch from the top edge. So essentially you'll have 2 stitches on this binding piece. So I'm going to lay this flat on my machine like this and go ahead and start stitching 1/8 of an inch from the raw edge. I'm going to lessen my presser foot tension. And just go slow over the seams. Go ahead and reposition as you need to. So I'm coming to one of the side seam pieces. I'm going to make sure that the side seam is going in toward, or the seam allowance is going in towards the side seam. So you see I'm just taking a few stitches at a time, coming around. Coming to another side seam. Make sure it's going in the right direction. Make sure it's on there real good. once I get the first round done, again, I'm going to go ahead and 1/8 of an inch from the top edge, I'm going to do another stitch. That is not necessary. It's purely optional. I do think it looks nice with the double stitch though. Last step in this process is to put the flap on. Now, if you are going to stitch your flap on, then I recommend you keep your bag turned wrong side out, and you can see essentially where the flap needs to be on the back side, right? You can see where the stabilizer is. So what you'll end up doing is just kind of wrapping that part around the bag. You could put some double-sided tape on there to hold it, and then you would go ahead and stitch your flap on. You're going to have to pull your pocket up to do that. I'm going to rivet it on, so I'm going to go ahead and just let the flap fall over basically where the stabilizer is. Make sure it's centered. Mark the rivet placement through the holes. Now I am going to turn my bag before I do that, so let me go ahead and turn it. And I do recommend, if you have the ability to use rivets here, it is a better option, or you can use Chicago screws. You don't have to use rivets, but it really, I think it looks nice, adds to the bag some, and makes putting the flap on a little bit easier. Gosh, I really like the suede with it. That's so pretty. That's so pretty. Okay, so again, I'm going to make sure this is all poked out good. And take the flap. I'm just going to take the flap, put it inside the bag for now, and fold it right over. I'm going to center it, okay? And then go ahead and mark the placement of the rivets through the flap, or through the holes, okay? Because we already punched our holes. Now, the only thing you want to make sure of is that you're not going to punch holes through any of your stitching, okay? So you can see these last rivet holes, or these last, are right next to that stitching. So really be careful and make sure that you do not punch out your stitching, okay? So I'll go ahead and punch those holes. And you are punching through the top part of your zipper pocket, okay? That's going to kind of help hold this down, and it's not going to flap as much. If you don't want to do that, let me just kind of back up for a second. You can flip your pocket up out of the way and punch your holes that way. Okay, that's 100% up to you, however you want to do that. I'm going to punch through. And then I'm going to go ahead and stick these in. Now, depending on the thickness of the material you're using will depend on the size rivets you use. So, you know, it's really hard for us to include rivets in kits because everybody's material is different. Everybody's rivet presses are different. And so if we did, we'd probably just be wasting money because it probably would not work with your specific rivet press and or thickness of your foe. So, you know, understand that's the reason why we don't. The best thing to do is have a variety of rivet sizes at your disposal. And what I have is 7mm, 8mm, 9mm, I'm sorry, not 7, 8. 8, 9, 10, and 12 are the rivet sizes that I keep on hand. Okay. Go right through. And then, of course, the very last thing is going to be to finish out our lock. And we will just put this other portion right on the flap. Make sure I can get through here. Got a little bit of thickness here because it's right at the edge of the zipper pocket as well. There we go. Oh, no, maybe not. Okay, and I have one more here. So I'm going to go ahead and press these rivets in, and then we will come back and put the second part of the turn lock on. Here's where we're at. We're so close. Okay, looks great. It needs to be ironed just a tad. I'll do that afterwards. So all we have left to do is to put the front part of this lock on. And the way we're going to do that, the lock has a section that's solid on one side and it's open on the other. Okay. The solid side is what's going to go against the bottom of the flap. So I'm going to take these screws out. And I'm going to find the center of the flap, either by measurement or, yeah, I better measure. Let's see. It's a little hard when there's a curve, but should be about here. Okay, I'm going to lay the bag flat, and you're going to take the base part and you're going to just line it up with that center mark. make sure that the bottom part of this piece is right on the edge of the bag, okay? You could theoretically use this part if it's easier for you so you can kind of see what you're doing, but the bottom part is going to go underneath the flap like this, okay? So you're going to want to draw, the hole you're going to punch is this kind of square. We'll call it a square. And I'm just going to go ahead and draw that square in. And I'm going to make sure one more time that it looks like it's going to be even. And it is. Now, as far as how to punch that square, you get a couple different options. You can use the largest setting on your tool. It's going to get pretty close. Or if you have one of these little kits from Amazon where you have different presses, there is one that is a square. And it works pretty darn good. Okay, the hole is punched, so now I'm going to take the main part here, kind of put it over that hole, and, oh, sorry, I'm going to take this part, put it over the hole, and then mark where my screws are going to go. You are going to have to punch out holes for your screws, and you want to make sure that you punch it large enough for the screw to go through. So I'm going to start out with this size here. You can always go a little bigger. You obviously want to go smaller first. And I'm just going to go ahead and punch those holes. Now, what's going to happen for me, and it may not happen for you, or it may, is when I go to punch the hole at the bottom, it's going to cut through my stitching, my top stitching. So if that happens, you need to go back and stitch again. It'll be underneath this section, so you shouldn't see it if you have to go back and top stitch, but you really don't want to just leave it because it will fall apart. So let me go ahead and punch this. And then I'm going to go right back to my machine. You can see right there it cut, and just stitch again. Okay, so I just went ahead and did another little top stitch there just to make sure that, you know, on back stitch, again, you're not going to see that. I just want to make sure all my stitches aren't going to fall apart. So now I'm going to put this piece on, and when I do, you want the whole part, or the all of these parts to come through. Okay. So I can see my stitching right there. I'm just going to kind of push that out of the way. And then go ahead and put this on. And put this on. And again, you want to use Loctite. And you'll see at the end of your flap, that's where that solid piece is. Okay, it's really pretty. So you will just put this in and fold it up. Okay, and then of course we will put our crossbody strap on, and we are finished. Okay, look at that. What a beautiful bag. All right, we're going to take a look in the front camera. Here she is, the Novella. So, different bag, right? Went together, I'm sure, much differently than anything you've ever done before. There's not a whole lot to this bag as far as pockets and stuff. It's really more about the style of the bag. Of course, we have a great crossbody strap here that you can carry the bag crossbody, or we have also a grab handle here at the top. Either way, however you want to wear it is perfectly acceptable. In the back, of course, we have rivets on the flap if you choose to install them that way. You can stitch instead. That's totally up to you. Okay. The uniqueness about this is whatever kind of lock you have, I think that's what's really going to make this bag stand apart from others. We have a vertical turn lock here. And when you open that up, of course, the flap opens up, and then inside we have just a zipper pocket, and that's it. And the zipper pocket hangs there because of the way the bag is put together. We really were not able to install a traditional zipper pocket the way we typically do. It has to be something slightly different because essentially all of this bag is put together exactly at the same time. Much different, I'm sure, than anything else you've ever seen. It's kind of fun coming up with making the bag itself, making the pattern. I do need two hands to close this lock. There we go. Okay, so you saw I stitched the entire thing on the Burnett machine. It certainly can be done. I used our gray solid faux leather, our suede gray faux leather. Of course, rivets are always optional, but they do look really nice. All of the hardware is nickel on this bag. I used Tiny Dots Gray by Tilda for the lining. And then the color thread I used is Hoover Gray. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I always love new pattern day and I love new bag days, love designing for you. I hope you enjoy it, something totally different. And until next time, everybody, happy sewing.